Namaste and good evening. Welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We began the other day with chapter 18, Mind and Supermind, and today we begin the third paragraph.
Page,
but in reality.
Yeah, that's right. But in reality. Page 172. But in reality. In this chapter, he is going to establish the connection between the supermind and the normal human mind. So we read the para first. But in reality, all that we call undivine can only be an action of the four divine principles themselves, such action of them as was necessary to create this universe of forms. Those forms have been created not outside, but in the divine existence, consciousness and bliss, not outside, but in and as a part
working of the divine
real idea. Okay, real idea. We'll discuss that. There is therefore no reason to suppose that there cannot be any real play of the divine, higher divine consciousness in a world of forms, or that forms and their immediate supports, mental consciousness, energy of vital force, and formal substance, must necessarily distort that which they represent. It is possible, even probable, that mind, body, and life are to be found in their pure forms, in the divine truth itself, are there in fact as subordinate activities of its consciousness and part of the complete instrumentation by which the supreme force always works. Mind, life, and body must then be capable of divinity. Their form and working in that short period, out of possibly only one cycle of the terrestrial evolution, which science reveals to us, need not represent all the potential workings of these three principles in the living body. They work as they do because they are by some means separated in consciousness from the divine truth from which they proceed. Were this separation once abrogated by the expanding energy of the divine in humanity, their present functioning might well be converted, would indeed naturally be converted by supreme evolution and progression into that purer working which they have in the truth consciousness. Quite clear what he's saying. But we'll go sentence by sentence and see whether it's clear, okay? But in reality, all that we call undivine, in the physical world, there is limitation, there is sin, there is
morality.
Yeah, immorality rather.
Immorality.
Perversion, suffering, pain, all these things are there. So these are all undivine things. So he's saying, but in reality, all that we call undivine can only be an action of the four divine principles themselves. The four divine principles, Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda, Supermind. These four principles are really creating so essentially all these things are really the same.
So nothing essentially is undivine.
Yes. Or in another way of looking, everything, it depends on how you are defining undivine. Everything is undivine right up to the highest level. You can see it in that way also. It depends on how you are defining undivine. Suppose you define undivine by, I say, multiplicity is undivine. Oneness is divine. Then you have this problem.
Yes, yes.
So it depends on how you are, whereas actually these definitions are mind-made. But actually the reality is not mind-made, it is made by the Supreme. So it's different ways of looking at things.
If God is in everything,
yes,
what is undivine?
There's nothing undivine. That's exactly the proper point. In fact, Mother says that at every level, There is perfection at that level. See, the animal world is perfect at its own level. That's exactly how it should be. But if you compare it with another, then the imperfections start showing up. Okay, so the lower, yesterday we were seeing how the manifestation must necessarily imply limitation, and limitation implies imperfection. Limitation is imperfection. So that's why it is undivine. Those forms have been created not outside but in the divine existence. When the world is created, it's not that the divine is there and he's creating it outside himself. He's creating it within himself. Those forms have been created not outside but in the divine consciousness, in the divine existence. In the divine existence, consciousness and bliss. You will see that he constantly goes on stressing back to Satchidananda. That's the basis, and everything in the world is a reflection of that existence, consciousness, bliss. Satchit Ananda. Not outside, but in and as a part of the working of the divine real idea. Now, this real idea, I think we have discussed it once
synonymous
before.
for truth consciousness.
Yes. But why is he calling it, first of all, an idea? And why is he using the word real? Okay.
In all caps.
Yeah, all caps. So we have to see what he's saying. For instance, if we compare with our own condition, then we'll understand what is meant by the real idea. If I want to build a house, okay, I start with an idea in the head. I want my house to be of 2 floors, not more. I want it to be surrounded by a garden. I want it to be built in this style. I want to use this materials. It's an idea in the mind. It has to become a reality in the physical world. But in the physical world, your idea will take time to become reality, and it may not even become real. It may remain incomplete. And even if it is completed, it may remain not according to what you wanted it to be, but something else. But in the supermind, the conception of what it wants to create is the idea, but that is absolutely real because it becomes exactly what is conceived, it becomes real immediately without loss of time. There is no question of time there. So that's why he's calling the real idea. So you can compare, if you want, the real idea to a blueprint. You can think of it in that way. So that's what a blueprint. But the difference between in ours it is idea with an I cap, with a lowercase I, and there it's an idea with an I cap, because it becomes absolute reality. So real idea. Okay? So then there is therefore no reason to suppose that there cannot be any real play of the higher divine consciousness in a world of forms, or that forms and their immediate supports, mental consciousness, energy of vital force, and formal substance, must necessarily distort that which they represent. So, here is something interesting. He is saying, therefore, there is no reason to suppose. So, why is he saying this? Because there are many who experience the Brahmic consciousness and say, oh, this is impossible, permanently undivine. So, if you want the divine, get away from this and go up. That's ascetic view. You want mukti, you can't get it in the physical world, you have to go up. Even if you can perfect your mind and you can perfect your vital, many have done it, your body will remain imperfect. So, perfection here in the physical world, not possible. So they say, possible.
And Mother said that just what you quoted, that there is perfection at every level.
Yes, that's right. Without comparing with other levels. Okay, so there is therefore no reason to suppose that there cannot be any real play of the higher divine consciousness in a world of forms, or that world of forms is clear, the physical world, where there forms are there. Of course, there are forms also in the vital world and there are forms also in the mental world, but these forms become more and more subtle, more and more plastic, more and more not durable. They become transient forms. Your thoughts also have forms, but they are not as firmly fixed as in the physical world. They change. Even the physical world, the forms go on changing, but it takes a long time. But in there, it's very, very plastic and the forms go on changing easily. I think I told you once about how even thoughts have forms, very clear forms and color. there was a drama being enacted on the 1st of December, Perseus the Deliverer. And Jugal Kishore Mukherjee was playing Perseus the Deliverer. And he had a very, very clear mind. Okay? And Mother is saying his thoughts, when they are coming out, they are so well formed. It's a sign that his mind is very, very clear. So, if your mind is not clear, then the forms will be hazy, fuzzy, wuzzy, without proper borders or anything. Indefinite forms, unformed forms, if you want. Even your vital emotions also have forms and color. We know that. So, those forms are there, but when he's speaking of the forms, here normally he is meaning the physical world, where the forms are more permanent than in the higher planes of consciousness. But are the forms also permanent here? No, not even the Himalayas. Rain and sun and storm and wind are going to change that. So there is nothing permanent in the physical world. This is the nature of the physical world, transience. Nothing permanent.
You knew Jugal well?
Pardon?
Did you know Jugal well?
Yes. Because when I was a young boy, I was a student, when I was in school, I knew him very well because I used to go to him at night and he used to stay in the room where Sri Aurobindo used to stay first. That same place in the, I think it's upstairs. Yes. He used to live there. And I used to go there, and at night I used to talk with him, and he used to give me a lot of guidance for life. Okay, so he was a great, he used to give me a lot of advice. So I knew him well.
And I have heard, and I suppose you've confirmed this, that he could tell you where any passage was in any of the books of Sri Aurobindo and Mother, or just
yes.
Sri Aurobindo and Mother.
Yes. He had a tremendous mind, very developed mind. So interestingly, if your mind is developed, that doesn't mean necessarily that your vitally is going to be proportionally fine. It may not be like that at all. So it's interesting, but he had a very fine mind. He had a very fine mind, very sharp and very clear. Once I had asked him, have you understood everything that Sri Aurobindo is saying in the Life Divine? He used the Bengali word. He said, Porishkar, clean. He said he understood everything. But that's a way of saying, because afterwards he started rereading. He used to reread. After he was 80 years old, he was taking less and less interest in knowledge, and he was taking more interest in his own readings. So he was studying again and again the text. He used to go on studying. He was also a good author. He used to write a lot of books he has written. So, forms. So when Sri Aurobindo is speaking of forms, he is meaning the physical world, the world of forms, or that forms and their immediate supports. Mental consciousness, energy of vital force, and formal substance. Formal substance, matter. Note the word formal, it's got several meanings. You have formal dress for parties, and but formal also is an adjective of form. So here he is never using in the first sense, he is always using in the second sense, that of form. Okay, so must necessarily distort that which they represent. So he is saying that it is true that there is a distortion. The manifestation implies limitation implies imperfection, but that is not absolutely essential. You can have a consciousness where you can see things here, the divine presence, without distortion. It should be possible. So, it is possible, even probable, that mind, body and life are to be found in their pure forms, in the divine truth itself, are there in fact as subordinate activities of its consciousness and part of the complete instrumentation by which the supreme force always works. Now this is an interesting sentence where he's saying clearly that matter, life and mind are all there already at the highest level in Satchidananda. Sat, which is normally people translate Sat as truth. Okay? But Srimad translates as existence. So that which exists is that which exists is truth. So you can say truth, but you can see it in another way also. You can think of it as substance. A substance is that which exists. In the physical world, if you think what is that which exists most prominently, it is matter. So matter is gross substance. Sat is subtle substance, the subtlest of substance. So there is a connection between the two. Then you come to Chit Shakti. Chit Shakti is actually becomes life here. Prana. It becomes the energy. Chit Shakti is energy, consciousness energy. It becomes here the vital force. Then you have the Ananda which becomes, and the supermind becomes the mind. So that's why saying these three things which are here already, mind, life and body, must be capable of divinity. Before that he's saying they are subordinate activities of its consciousness and part of the complete instrumentation by which the Supreme Force always works. Now this interesting word he has used, complete instrumentation. Okay? See, if I want to build something in the physical world, first of all, I require technical knowledge. Technical knowledge is consciousness. I require material. If I am a maker of cars, for instance, I require steel. So I require substance. And I also require force. I require the energy to do that. If I have only the material and an idea in the mind that I can do this, it won't work. I need the energy to do it. This is exactly what the divine has to produce the world. He has consciousness, which is the technical knowledge how to create the world. He has the substance, which is Sat, and he also has the force to make it into reality. So this is interesting how the divine is provided with Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda so that he can create the world.
Instrumentation.
It's an interesting thing that how you require substance, you require force, you require technical knowledge, that is consciousness or knowledge. So all the things are there and the divine uses these to create the world. If a single one was not there, no creation would have been possible. Okay? So that's why using the word complete instrumentation, by which the Supreme Force always works. Mind, life and body must then be capable of divinity, because there is a connection and they are really the same essentially. So it should be possible to make them divine. Mind, life, body must then be capable of divinity. Their form and their working in that short period, out of possibly only one cycle of the terrestrial evolution which science reveals to us, need not represent all the potential workings of these three principles in the living body. He's saying that right now, as it is at present and what science is exploring and saying, this need not be the permanent state of things. That's what he's meaning. It can change. There can be other. In fact, the yogi is showing that it is possible to have other states. The mind can be changed, the vital can be changed. Nobody has changed the body as yet, but it can be changed. What the scientist is studying here is not the only possibility. There can be other possibilities also. In other words, the divine possibility is also there. In fact, if you see evolution, then it becomes very clear. First, there was only matter. And if scientists came, he would think that matter is the only thing that exists. Then life comes out of it. So circumstances are changing. Then mind comes out of it. So why not something more higher up? That's what is meaning by this sentence. That there can be, the present condition need not be permanent. It can change. Okay? He is using the word one cycle of the terrestrial evolution, which science reveals to us, need not represent all the potential workings of these three principles in the living body. They work as they do because they are by some means separated in consciousness from the divine truth from which they proceed. Body is not connected with Sat, life is not connected with Chit Shakti, and our
Mind.
The mind is not connected with the supermind. And therefore, this is the present condition. But it need not be so. If the connection is established, things can change. Can the connection be made? Yes, that's what he says. Okay, so there you are. He's saying, were this separation once abrogated by the expanding energy of the divine in humanity, their present functioning might well be converted, would indeed naturally be converted by supreme evolution and progression into that purer working which they have in the truth consciousness. In the truth consciousness, the laws that operate can also operate here if the division is separated. And that's exactly what Sri Aurobindo did. He brought down the supermind into matter here and abrogated the difference between the two. That's exactly what he did. So now the connection has been made. Earlier the connection was not there, but he has made the connection, the evolution. First of all, the connection was made between life and matter. That was the first step in evolution. There was no connection before that. There was no life on earth. Then second, mind also was brought in. And Sri Aurobindo says that every time this happens, there is a step in evolution which is going further. It's an avatar who has to do the work. So obviously, he is the avatar of the supermind. His implication is very clear that an avatar has to do this work. So he has brought the supermind down now. Maybe there are other steps also after that.
The involution.
Yeah. That's right. The involution is there. That's an interesting thing. On the one hand, we are saying that the divine is already here in matter. So there is an evolution. But in Sri Aurobindo's view, there has to be both. An evolution also, but the higher must also come down into the lower and change it. So there has to be at the same time a descent. And he talks of an ascent as well as a descent. For instance, if a yogi goes out of his body and goes into the higher planes of consciousness, the higher he goes, he has the power to change the lower levels of consciousness. He has to descend again with that consciousness into mind and change it. Many have done it. They can also come into the vital and change the vital also, purify the vital. The body has not yet been done fully. Huge changes take place in the body also. We know how Sri Aurobindo's body was changed completely. But the idea of transformation of the body as he has visualized it has not yet happened. It becomes a divine body. That has not happened yet. But it can happen because there is a connection that has been made.
Mother brought it quite far.
Yes.
But her physical body was not able
That's right.
to hold it.
Yeah. The world conditions were not ready.
Yes.
And that's an interesting thing again. Many people ask, if the divine is all powerful, why doesn't he do everything? But that's a game he's playing. He has himself created the conditions and the limitations, and now he is doing it step by step. He is himself doing what he has created. He has taken it as a challenge and he is doing that. We believe, I think there are many who believe that the transformation of the body, Mother has been able to make right up to the subtle physical. So it's now a question of that precipitating into the physical. Okay, so where this separation between what and what? Separation between Satchidananda and mind-like body. The separation, if it is abrogated by the expanding energy of the divine in humanity, their present functioning might well be converted. This expanding energy of the divine is interesting. We are limited in our mind. By the expanding consciousness, you get into the cosmic consciousness. So this expansion has to occur at the mental level, vital level, physical level. So then it should be possible. If the expansion is complete, then it can be divinized.
Yet Mother said that, and he says in Savitri also, that we might break if it came too soon.
Yes. That's why it's a slow process. Step by step it has to be done. Can't be done in one stroke. In fact, there are technical terms in yoga which they use for these things. If you are not fully ready and you call down the force, it can happen. It has happened we have had several cases here like that in the ashram. There is one boy who was a good athlete, He was Niruddha's nephew. He was a very good athlete. So he was throwing the javelin, and when he threw the javelin, he called on Mother to give him the force to do it. And he made a record. That throw it stood for a long time as a record. But his body was not sufficiently developed to absorb that force without spilling it or without it doing some damage. So he lost his mind to a great extent. He is still like that. He is living, but he is still like that. He is not normal. So you have to be very careful. That's why Sri Aurobindo says we are going from life divine to synthesis. He says that you must never pull. You must aspire calmly and quietly. But pulling is a wrong attitude. You should never pull. That boy pulled and he had to suffer the consequences. In fact, he says about Ramakrishna also. He says that Ramakrishna also pulled. In fact, we have seen some films of Ramakrishna. He used to lie down on the bank of the Ganges, that Hooghly river, and going, Dakhat means show yourself to me, show yourself to me. He's forcing. And that's why he had to suffer. There used to be body burning in the body afterwards. He had to face that. But of course, he was a different category, but there are consequences when you pull. That's the thing. So no pulling. Calm, quiet, offering yourself to the divine, opening yourself to the divine. So, it's possible to divinize if the divisions are healed. The Sat and body must become same. Chit Shakti and the life, Supermind and the mind must all become compatible with each other. Then it is possible. We go to the next para?
Yes.
In that case, not only would it be possible to manifest and maintain the divine consciousness in the human mind and body, but even that divine consciousness might in the end, increasing its conquests, remold mind, life and body themselves into a more perfect image of the eternal truth and realize not only in soul but in substance its kingdom of heaven upon earth. In other words, even the body can be changed and divinized. Mind, many people have been able to do. Many yogis have been able to transform their mind, even transform their vital. But the body, he is saying, even that can be done. Okay? So, and the kingdom of heaven upon earth. So, the kingdom of heaven upon earth. The first of these victories, the internal, has certainly been achieved in a greater or less degree by some, perhaps by many upon earth. The other, the external, even if never more or less realized in past eons as the first type for future cycles and still held in the subconscious memory of the earth nature, may yet be intended as a coming victorious achievement of God in humanity. So, it may not have been done in the past, but even if there is a famous story of Trishanku. Trishanku was the one who wants to go to heaven with his body, not with his consciousness. He wants to go to heaven with his body. What does that imply? Very clearly, divinizing of the body. Because if you don't have a divine body, how will you go to heaven? In fact, the legend says about going up, but actually it also means that the divine coming down into your body. It's the same thing. But he could not do it. He had to go halfway. It is a long story. He goes to first Vishwamitra, then he goes to other yogis to help him, and they all say, no, it can't be done, no, it can't be done. One person helps him to go midway, and he is hanging in the middle. So the work has not yet been done. It is still to be done. So Sri Aurobindo is talking of the subconscious memory of the earth nature. So this is one of the stories is the subconscious memory of the earth nature. That this should be possible one day. Mother speaks of, in the letters there is a reference to Mother speaking about le corps glorieux, the glorious body.
Yes.
That also is the same thing. A divinizing of the human body. So, may yet be intended as a coming victorious achievement. Now look at Sri Aurobindo's language. May yet be intended. All through Life Divine, it's like that. He takes you by the hand and says, this possibility is there, that possibility is there. He never makes categorical statements. Okay? But in letters, private letters, he will say, the supramental descent is a thing decreed and inevitable in the evolution of the earth. But here in Life Divine, he's suggesting things all the time. Okay? So, this earthly life need not necessarily and forever, need not be necessarily and forever a wheel of half joyous, half anguished effort. Attainment may also be intended and the glory and joy of God made manifest upon earth. So, should be possible to do it. Nowhere he is saying that I am the agent to do it. He and mother were the agents to do that. Bring it down. But never speaks of that in this way. Even when he is talking about the, he's saying in Life Divine, he says in one place towards the end, he says, but if nature has already taken the decision to go to the next step, he uses these words. But actually nature has not taken the decision. Mother and son have taken the decision to bring it down. And they did that work. They made the decision and so. You remember in Savitri there are many lines where it says, he says, when Savitri goes up, she is admonished. She says, is this enough? What will you tell the Supreme when he says that I sent you down for a particular work and you have come without finishing that work? So that's exactly the work that you have to do here is that work. So, what mind, life and body are in their supreme sources and what therefore they must be in the integral completeness of the divine manifestation when informed by the truth and not cut off from it by the separation and the ignorance in which presently we live, this then is the problem that we have next to consider. For there they must have already their perfection towards which we here are growing. We who are only the first shackled movement of the mind which is evolving in matter, we who are not yet liberated from the conditions and effects of that involution of spirit in form, that plunge of light into its own shadow by which the darkened material consciousness of physical nature was created. We have not yet looked at the connection, that's what he's saying. We'll start looking at the connections. The type of all perfection towards which we grow, the terms of our highest evolution, must already be held in the divine real idea. They must be there, formed and conscious for us to grow towards and into them. To grow towards and into them. For that pre-existence in the divine knowledge is what our human mentality names and seeks as the ideal. The ideal is an eternal reality which we have not yet realized in the conditions of our own being, not a non-existent which the eternal and divine has not yet grasped, but only we imperfect beings have glimpsed and mean to create. So, the intended final result here is already there, waiting to become a reality. It is not yet manifested. That which is the blueprint has to become the reality here, the real idea. So, what he is going to do is very interesting. It took me a long time to find this out. What he is saying now, I will start establishing the connection between the higher and the lower to show you that it is possible. So, look now, interesting. He says, mind first, the chained and hampered sovereign of our human living. Non-sentence.
Yes.
No sentence.
Yes.
So it's very clear what he's saying. Very often he uses this style, okay? He's saying, I'll consider mind first. So, after several readings, I said, oh, he's going to examine now the connection between the higher and the lower. So mind first. So let me see where he's going to talk about the life secondly. So I start looking. There is nowhere in that chapter, there is no second. He starts that in the next chapter. So then you realize how this first, how he is building his, so the next chapter will be again matter. So this is how he is doing. Normally we wouldn't have done that. We would have said, I will consider one by one. First I'll consider mind, then I'll consider life, then I'll consider matter. His style is totally different. So mind first. Where's the second? You won't find it in this chapter. It's there in the next chapter. So, that is when I realized the architecture of his prose. He has already built it, and he is built in such a way, his style is quite different. In fact, we used to have a mathematics professor. His name was Venkatraman. He used to come from Madurai to the ashram, and he used to teach Madurai University. He used to give a talk, and he used to come here. Friday night he used to come, Saturday, Sunday spend here and go back. He's a brilliant man. Pakka Brahmin, dark, always wears a lungi only, and bare feet almost always, hair shaved, only a tuft of hair here. Philosophy, mathematics, Sanskrit. Expert. Brilliant man. He used to say that people write sentence by sentence. Some people write paragraphs by paragraphs. Sri Aurobindo writes chapter by chapter. That's exactly what I discovered when I found it. This one word first makes you realize that he is writing chapter by chapter. That's the architecture of his prose. That's how he builds his prose. So, mind first, the chained and hampered sovereign of our human living. Mind, in its essence, is a consciousness which measures, limits, cuts out forms of things from the indivisible whole and contains them as if each were a separate integer. Even with what exists only as obvious parts and fractions, mind establishes this fiction of its ordinary commerce that they are things with which it can deal separately and not merely as aspects of a whole. For even when it knows that they are not things in themselves, it is obliged to deal with them as if they were things in themselves. Otherwise, it could not subject them to its own characteristic activity. It is this essential characteristic of mind which conditions the workings of all its operative powers, whether conception, perception, sensation, or the dealings of creative thought. It conceives, perceives, senses things as if rigidly cut out from a background or a mass and employs them as fixed units of the material given to it for creation or possession. All its action and enjoyment deal thus with wholes that form part of a greater whole, and these subordinate wholes again are broken up into parts which are also treated as wholes for the particular purposes they serve. Mind may divide, multiply, add, subtract, but it cannot get beyond the limits of this mathematics. If it goes beyond and tries to conceive a real whole, it loses itself in a foreign element. It falls from its own firm ground into the ocean of the intangible, into the abysms of the infinite, where it can neither perceive, conceive, sense, nor deal with its subject for creation and enjoyment. For if mind appears sometimes to conceive, to perceive, to sense, or to enjoy with possession the infinite, it is only in seeming and always in a figure of the infinite. What it does thus vaguely possess is simply a formless vast and not the real spaceless infinite. The moment it tries to deal with that, to possess it, at once the inalienable tendency to delimitation comes in, and the mind finds itself again handling images, forms, words. Mind cannot possess the infinite. It can only suffer it, or be possessed by it. It can only lie blissfully helpless under the luminous shadow of the real, cast down on it from planes of existence beyond its reach. The possession of the infinite cannot come except by an ascent to those supramental planes, nor the knowledge of it except by an inert submission of mind to the descending messages of the truth conscious reality. Mind is the great divider, and this division of the mind starts at the overmind level. The overmind also is mind. When Sri Aurobindo speaks of mind, he is talking of the aspect of knowledge which is dividing. It starts right at the physical mind. Then it goes to the vital mind and the pure mind. The pure mind is that which can think abstractly without reference to the body and vital. It's objective. That's a pure mind. Then you have the spiritual planes of consciousness. All these are mind planes of consciousness. So the division that he is talking about starts at the overmind level. Right from there it becomes, in a sense, worse and worse and worse and worse, and finally it becomes a total division. The multiplicity becomes infinite. That's our mind. But the moment you go above pure mind, you go into the higher mind, already you start getting glimpses of the oneness. You can start seeing the oneness of things. Yesterday we were talking about the astronaut. When he goes up, he's seeing the whole earth is one. He has lost the capacity to see the multiplicity. He can't see the details in the world. He's seeing only the whole. So that's what happens when you go to the higher mind level. You start seeing the multiplicity you start seeing the unity more than the multiplicity. That's the nature of the mind that he's discussing. And if mind wants to experience the infinite, it goes into a swoon. It disappears. There is no mind there. The mind can only go up to there. In another place he says something very interesting. He says, mind will take you up to the border of the infinite and will tell you, sorry, I can't go any further. Now your consciousness, you are on your own, you can go. But I can't go any further than this. Our mind stops at the pure mind level, and into the higher mind, if it goes, it loses itself. That's what he's saying.
What does it mean by it can only suffer it?
Suffer in the sense of experience. The word suffer means to undergo, to experience. It doesn't mean pain.
It can also mean to allow.
Yes. I will suffer his presence here.
Yes.
In that sense.
That's right.
So, allow. That in that sense. Okay. Yeah, that's another thing. When you read Sri Aurobindo, your English will improve tremendously, but you have to take the trouble of checking the dictionary. When you are reading Sri Aurobindo, Life Divine here, but dictionary here. Always.
Okay. Same with Savitri.
Yes, absolutely. So, I'm reading the next one. This essential faculty and the essential limitation that accompanies it are the truth of mind and fix its real nature and action, Swabhava and Swadharma. These two are interesting concepts, Swabhava and Swadharma. We'll discuss that in detail one day, some other time. But this is its inherent nature. That's what he means by Swabhava. The inherent nature of mind is to divide. Even we say in the ordinary, it is the mind that analyzes. When it analyzes something, it understands. It is not a synthetic capacity. It doesn't have a synthetic capacity. It analyzes and then groups them together. But only by analysis the mind can understand. So that's the main characteristic is the essential limitation that accompanies it as the truth of mind and fix its real nature and action, Swabhava and Swadharma. Here is the mark of the divine fiat, assigning it its office in the complete instrumentation of the supreme Maya. The office determined by that which it is in its very birth, from the eternal self-conception of the self-existent. That's a function of the mind, to divide. That office is to translate always infinity into the terms of the finite, to measure off, limit, de-piece. Actually, it does this in our consciousness to the exclusion of all true sense of the infinite. Therefore, mind is the nodus of the great ignorance. Wherever there is mind, there is ignorance. Because it is that which originally divides and distributes, and it has even been mistaken for the cause of the universe and for the whole of the divine Maya. But the divine Maya comprehends Vidya as well as Avidya. Vidya is seeing the word, Sanskrit word is meaning knowledge, but knowledge as defined as seeing the oneness, and Avidya as seeing the many. The knowledge as well as the ignorance. For it is obvious that since the finite is only an appearance of the infinite, a result of its action, a play of its conception, and cannot exist except by it, in it, with it, as a background, itself form of that stuff and action of that force, there must be an original consciousness which contains and views both at the same time and is intimately conscious of all the relations of the one with the other. In that consciousness, there is no ignorance, because the infinite is known and the finite is not separated from it as an independent reality. But still, there is a subordinate process of delimitation. Otherwise, no world could exist. A process by which the ever dividing and reuniting consciousness of mind, the ever divergent and convergent action of life, and the infinitely divided and self aggregating substance of matter come all by one principle and original act into phenomenal being. That is division. Division is the one that creates the world. This subordinate process of the eternal seer and thinker, perfectly luminous, perfectly aware of himself and all, knowing well what he does, conscious of the infinite in the finite which he is creating, may be called the divine mind. The divine mind is supermind. And it is obvious that it must be a subordinate and not really a separate working of the real idea of the supermind, and must operate through what we have described as the apprehending consciousness of the truth consciousness. He is going back to the chapter on the triple status of supermind. So this apprehending consciousness is the one that creates the many and goes into each one separately. So he is calling that the divine mind. There is a difference. I'll read that again carefully. This subordinate process of the eternal seer and thinker, perfectly luminous, perfectly aware of himself and all, knowing well what he does, conscious of the infinite in the finite, which he is creating, may well be called the divine mind. And it is obvious that it must be a subordinate and not really a separate working of the real idea of the supermind, and must operate through what we have described as the apprehending movement of the truth consciousness. In fact, when he is talking of the apprehending consciousness, he is referring to the second status of the supermind. If you remember the first status of the supermind, oneness, no creation. The second status, the waves start forming, the many start forming. So the origin of multiplicity is the second status of supermind, that which he is calling the divine mind. The third one, the third status, more of the many than the one. Remember the three grades. First there is oneness, then there is the waves are beginning to form, but each wave is conscious that it is part of the sea. So that's an apprehending consciousness. Then finally you come down to the third level. Each wave is now more inclined towards its own individuality rather than its being part of the sea. And when it comes down to the overmind level, complete multiplicity. And that's why he's calling the ignorance, it goes right up to that level. Okay? So he is establishing the connection between mind and supermind, and he is taking you right up to the overmind level.